Hi, I'm Claire and I'm a member of Extinction Rebellion in Manchester. I've been involved since September last year when I went along to a public meeting, and just was very drawn to the way that the speakers were talking about the scale of the crisis that we faced, that I felt echoed what I'd been feeling, and also the tactics and response that was put out. And since then I've been involved in a number of protests in London and Manchester, and I want to use this video to talk about the three demands of Extinction Rebellion and how they relate to Greater Manchester as I see it. So the three demands are to, number one, tell the truth, and that's often translated as to declare a climate emergency, because if we acknowledge the scale of what the science is telling us, then clearly it is a massive emergency. It's a huge crisis of both the climate and the environment. The second demand is to act now, and so if we acknowledge the scale of the emergency, we will act now, and the way that we will do that is to say, well, we want the UK to become a carbon zero country by 2025, 60 years from now. And the third demand of Extinction Rebellion is to go beyond politics and for the UK government to convene a citizens' assembly to answer the question, how would we become a carbon zero country by 2025, and to make key recommendations that would then be acted on by the government. So I want to use this video to talk about how I see that relating to Greater Manchester. And the first one is to say that in Greater Manchester we have 10 councils and then the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And it's very important that those bodies declare a climate emergency, and only one of them has, that's Trafford, although it hasn't followed it through yet with any sort of meaningful action plan. And the reason we want a climate emergency declared, it's not words, it's not just a gimmick, it's that once that happens, it's an acknowledgement that all the actors who need to take action to make it happen acknowledge the scale of the problem that we face. And that is the problem today, is that not everybody has done, that we've had vested interests trying to tinker with business as usual to make incremental change. And if you've been reading any of the reports that I have, whether it's the UN report on climate or the UN report on species loss, you will know that we are way beyond incremental changes. So that's why a climate emergency declaration is so important, because it effectively it means that everyone involved, everyone around the table acknowledges the scale of the problem. And only once that has happened, can we then move forward with solutions, because if we don't do that, we're just tinkering around the edges. So that is what we want to happen in Greater Manchester. We want Greater Manchester Combined Authority and the 10 councils to declare. The second point is to become carbon neutral by 2025 as a country, and at the moment Greater Manchester's plan for that is to become carbon neutral by 2038. Unfortunately, that is something of a flawed plan for a variety of reasons, one of which is that plan says that Greater Manchester will emit only 71 million tonnes of carbon by 2038, and unfortunately all the measures in the plan, if they all happened, we'd emit double that. So right from the get-go the plan doesn't go far enough, and it just assumes that people are just going to voluntarily play their part. And unfortunately, most of the 2.7 million people in Greater Manchester are blissfully unaware of what they're going to need to do. Businesses are going to need to take action, many of them probably voluntarily, because it takes years to pull legislation together. And so the point is that this plan is well-meaning, but it's not going to lead to any significant action. And another problem with this 2038 plan is that it ignores significant areas for action, and that's because it's still trying to do incremental change. So one of the areas that it completely ignores is the airport. Manchester Airport is currently committed to significant growth, going from 2.8 million passengers a year to 45 million. That's an increase of 55% in the next 12 years. That completely flies in the face of any commitment around carbon reductions. So that has to be addressed. And the way that that would be addressed would be through the third demand, which is to declare a citizens' assembly, not just in the UK, but at the Greater Manchester level. And the reason for that is that, we acknowledge that this is difficult. These are complicated questions. Politicians rely on popular votes. They don't know what public opinion will kind of tolerate. The policymakers are part of the status quo. There are businesses and organisations that need to go further than frankly will feel comfortable. So the way that we want that to happen, or the way that we think that can happen, is through a citizens' assembly where you convene a democratically constituted body of, let's say, 100 people chosen through a formal process to be representative of Greater Manchester, and you ask those people that question: how do we bring that 2038 figure far forward to be in keeping with the crisis, the scale of the crisis that we face? And what tends to happen when you do that is that because those people represent the society, not necessarily the vested interest, that those people come up with recommendations, bold recommendations, far bolder than the politicians probably think that we're ready for. And we saw this in Ireland when a citizens' assembly was convened to think about the question of abortion. The politicians in Ireland did not think that the people were ready to have abortion legalised. So they convened a citizens' assembly to ask that question. The assembly recommended that it was, and that was put to a referendum, and 66% of people voted to make abortion legal in Ireland last year. And that's what happens when you give complex questions to everyday people and support them through a deliberative democratic process where they're encouraged to investigate the issues and question them and question panels of experts. And this assembly could be a way that the whole of Greater Manchester could get involved in these questions, these really big, crunchy questions about which are about kind of the future of communities in this region. How do we want to live? What kind of places do we want to be? Do we want to have community energy schemes? Do we want to be growing our own food? How do we become resilient to some of the climate changes that we're going to face? So those are how I see the three demands of Extinction Rebellion translating into what they mean on the ground here in Greater Manchester. Thanks for listening.